Why do most men fail to reach 80 years of age? Even those who were healthy and active in their 60s and 70s often experience a rapid decline once they reach their late 70s. Many people assume it's just genetics or bad luck, but that's far from the whole story. In this video, we're going to examine 5 hidden factors that explain why many men struggle to live beyond 80. These aren't the usual suspects like heart disease, smoking, or poor diet. These are deeper, often overlooked factors that silently chip away at longevity, even in men who've done most things right throughout their lives. The good news is that once you understand these factors, you can take action before it's too late. So if you've ever wondered what really prevents men from living longer and how to guard against premature decline, stay with me until the end of this video. These 5 revelations might just change the trajectory of your later years or help someone you care about. Now, let's begin. Number 1. The isolation cascade. One of the first and most overlooked reasons many men don't live past 80 is what medical researchers call the isolation cascade. This isn't about being completely alone or friendless. Rather, it's about the gradual disappearance of regular, meaningful social connections that once structured a man's life. Think about it. Throughout his working years, a man typically interacts with dozens of people every day: colleagues, clients, the barista at the coffee shop, the security guard in the lobby. Each interaction, however brief, helps regulate his nervous system and reinforces his sense of identity and purpose. But after retirement, many men experience a dramatic reduction in these daily interactions. They no longer have meetings to attend or lunch breaks with coworkers. They don't bump into acquaintances in the office hallway, and while their wives or partners often maintain robust social networks, many men find their social circles shrinking to just family and perhaps a few close friends. This isolation doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in slowly. Maybe he stops going to community events because they're not that interesting anymore. Perhaps he reduces his volunteer work because the younger folks have it covered. He might even start declining family gatherings because it's too much hassle to travel. What's fascinating is that most men don't even realize it's happening. They think they're just simplifying their lives or enjoying well-earned rest. But what they're actually doing is dismantling the social framework that kept their brains stimulated and their stress hormones regulated. I worked with a patient named Richard, 79, who had been exceptionally healthy his whole life: good blood pressure, active lifestyle, careful diet. But after his retirement from a management position, he gradually withdrew from his community organizations and golf club. When I asked why, he said he just didn't see the point anymore. Within 3 years, his cognitive function began showing subtle signs of decline, his inflammatory markers increased, and his resilience to minor illnesses decreased dramatically. The science behind this is clear. Prolonged isolation, even the mild kind, triggers a stress response in the body. It increases inflammation, weakens immune function, and even accelerates cellular aging. For men especially, whose social connections are often activity-based rather than conversation-based, the loss of structured social engagement can be devastating. So if you find yourself talking to fewer people each day, or if you've stopped participating in group activities that once gave your week structure, pay attention to that warning sign. Those interactions weren't just pleasant diversions, they were keeping you alive at a cellular level. Number 2. The stewardship void. Another powerful but rarely discussed reason many men struggle past 75 is what I call the stewardship void, the gradual loss of areas where a man feels needed, responsible, and in control. Throughout most of a man's life, he occupies various stewardship roles. He might be responsible for leading a team at work, maintaining the family home, managing finances, or being the go-to person for advice or problem solving. These roles aren't just tasks, they're central to his identity and sense of place in the world. But as men age, especially after 75, these areas of stewardship often get systematically stripped away. Adult children take over the financial planning to make things easier. The lawn service is hired because climbing stairs has become difficult. The car keys are gently confiscated after a minor fender bender. Each change seems sensible and well-intentioned, but together, they create a profound psychological shift. They tell a man that he is no longer needed, that the world will function fine without his input or effort. I've seen this pattern repeatedly in my practice. Men who were once eager to face each day, gradually becoming passive, not because they're physically incapable, but because they no longer have domains where their decisions matter. Take Thomas, a former business owner who had always handled his family's investments. At 78, his son convinced him to let a financial advisor take over the complicated stuff. Within months, Thomas stopped tracking any financial matters at all. "What's the point?" he said. "Nobody needs me to worry about it anymore." His withdrawal didn't stop there. It spread to other areas of his life, and his overall health began to decline accordingly. The body responds to this loss of agency in powerful ways. When a man no longer feels that his actions and decisions have meaningful impact, stress hormones like cortisol increase, inflammation rises, and motivation plummets. The immune system becomes less responsive. Sleep quality deteriorates. This doesn't mean families shouldn't help aging fathers and grandfathers, but there's a difference between offering support and removing autonomy. Men need to maintain spaces, however modified, where their judgment, experience, and efforts still matter. If you found yourself surrendering more and more areas of responsibility, not because you want to, but because others insist they're helping, it's time to reclaim some territory. Because staying alive after 75 isn't just about physical health, it's about maintaining a sense that your presence in the world still makes a difference. And if you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment stewardship below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content. Now let's continue. Number 3. Circadian disruption. There's a hidden biological clock that governs nearly every process in your body, from how your cells repair themselves to how your brain processes information. This internal timekeeper is your circadian rhythm, and after age 75, disruptions to this system become particularly dangerous for men. Most men don't realize that their circadian rhythms become increasingly fragile with age. The pineal gland, which produces melatonin, calcifies more in men than women as they age. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain's master clock, becomes less responsive to environmental cues. And yet, many older men pay less attention to protecting their daily rhythms just when they need it most. It often starts innocuously. Maybe he begins staying up later watching television. Perhaps he starts taking longer naps during the day when he feels tired. He might stop going outside regularly, especially during winter months. Each change seems minor, but together they send conflicting signals to his body about when to be alert and when to rest. The consequences aren't immediately apparent. First comes subtle fatigue that doesn't improve with rest. Then memory becomes less reliable. Metabolism slows. Immune function weakens. And perhaps most critically for men, cardiovascular regulation, the consistent patterns of blood pressure and heart rate begins to falter. I worked with a patient named James, 81, who came to me with complaints of persistent fatigue and declining memory despite adequate sleep. His medical workup showed no obvious cause, but when we discussed his daily routine, I discovered he'd developed highly irregular sleep patterns since his wife's passing 2 years earlier. Some nights he'd stay up until 3 a.m. watching old films. Other days he'd nap for hours in the afternoon. We implemented a simple but strict light exposure protocol, 30 minutes of morning sunlight within an hour of waking, even if just sitting by a bright window, consistent meal times, no screens after 8 p.m., and a regular bedtime. The improvement in his cognitive function, energy levels, and even his blood pressure regulation was remarkable within just 3 weeks. The research is clear: men with disrupted circadian rhythms show accelerated cellular aging, increased cancer risk, and significantly higher cardiovascular vulnerability. The body requires predictable cycles of activity and rest to perform essential maintenance and repair work, especially after 75 when cellular resilience is naturally declining. So if your sleep schedule has become erratic, if your days lack consistent patterns of light exposure and activity, or if you find yourself increasingly disconnected from natural cycles of day and night, recognize this as a serious threat to your longevity, not just a matter of comfort or preference. Number 4. Emotional insulation. By the time most men reach their late 70s, they've experienced significant losses: spouses, siblings, close friends, and sometimes even children. What's rarely acknowledged is how these accumulated losses affect men differently than women, particularly in how they process grief. Many men of this generation were raised with strong messages about emotional stoicism. Keep a stiff upper lip. Don't show weakness. These cultural directives shape how men respond to loss, often leading to what psychologists call emotional insulation, the practice of containing or suppressing emotional pain rather than processing it. This emotional insulation might look like strength from the outside. He doesn't cry at the funeral. He quickly returns to his routines. He rarely speaks of his departed wife except in brief, matter-of-fact references. Family members might even praise his resilience. But inside, unprocessed grief creates physiological chaos. Studies show that suppressed emotions trigger prolonged inflammation responses, hormonal imbalances, and immune system dysfunction. For men specifically, this emotional bunkering has been linked to accelerated cardiovascular damage. One reason widowers are statistically more likely to die within 2 years of losing their spouse. I remember working with Edward, age 79, who lost his brother, his last surviving sibling and closest confidant. Edward prided himself on handling it well. He didn't dwell on it and kept busy with projects. But 6 months later, his previously well-controlled hypertension became dangerously unstable. His sleep deteriorated. Even his diabetes management, excellent for decades, suddenly became problematic. It wasn't until Edward began attending a men's grief group, initially very reluctantly, that these physical symptoms began to stabilize. The simple act of speaking about his brother, of naming his loss and its impact, created physiological relief that no medication could provide. This pattern repeats itself with remarkable consistency. Men who find appropriate channels for emotional expression, whether through one-on-one conversations, support groups, journaling, or faith practices, show significantly better health outcomes after major losses than those who internalize their grief. The science is increasingly clear. Emotions aren't just psychological experiences, they're biological events with measurable physical consequences. When powerful emotions remain unexpressed, they don't simply fade away. They get translated into cellular stress, cardiovascular strain, and immune dysfunction. So if you've experienced significant losses but rarely speak of them, if you pride yourself on having moved on quickly, or if you find yourself irritable or restless without understanding why, consider whether emotional insulation might be silently shortening your life. Because contrary to what many men have been taught, acknowledging grief isn't weakness, it's essential biological maintenance. And if you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment emotions below to let me know you're here. Your engagement helps our content reach more people who might benefit from this information. Now let's move to our final point. Number 5. Purpose atrophy. The final and perhaps most powerful reason many men don't thrive past 80 relates to something fundamental to the male psyche. Throughout most of a man's life, his sense of purpose is often tied to his work, his role as provider, his projects, and his ability to solve problems and overcome challenges. These purposeful activities aren't just psychologically satisfying, they trigger cascades of neurochemicals that literally sustain physical health. But after 75, many men experience what I call purpose atrophy, the gradual fading of clear, meaningful objectives that organize their energy and attention. The retirement party ends, the career concludes, the children are raised, the major life goals achieved, and in their place often comes leisure, rest, free time. While these sound appealing in theory, the human brain, and the male brain in particular, doesn't thrive in purposeless comfort. It needs meaningful challenge, productive struggle, and the satisfaction of problems solved and contributions made. Without these elements, a cascade of biological changes begins. Testosterone levels, already naturally declining with age, drop more rapidly, growth hormone production decreases. The brain's reward circuitry becomes less responsive. And perhaps most critically, the sense of agency, the belief that one's actions matter, begins to fade. I've observed this pattern repeatedly in my practice. Men who maintain clear, purposeful objectives well into their 80s and beyond show remarkably better health metrics than those who drift into unstructured retirement. Their inflammatory markers are lower. Their cognitive function remains sharper. Their physical strength declines more slowly. Consider George, 86, who came to my office with his third wife, 72, whom he'd married just 2 years earlier. Despite numerous health challenges, including controlled prostate cancer and a cardiac stent, George's cognitive testing and physical function were exceptional for his age. His secret wasn't genetic luck, it was purpose. After retiring from engineering at 70, he'd established a small consulting practice helping young entrepreneurs with product design. 4 mornings each week, he worked with these young innovators, solving problems and mentoring the next generation. "They keep me sharp," he told me. "They need what I know, and I need their energy." This wasn't just about staying busy, it was about staying necessary, about contributing value that wouldn't exist without his specific knowledge and effort. The neurochemistry behind this is fascinating. Purposeful activity increases dopamine, which doesn't just create pleasure, it enhances immune function and reduces inflammation. It triggers the release of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which protects brain cells and promotes neural repair. It improves insulin sensitivity and cardiovascular regulation. So if your days have become formless, if you struggle to articulate what you're working toward, or if you can't identify how the world benefits from your specific presence in it, recognize this as a serious health risk, not just a philosophical concern. Men need purpose like they need food and water. It's not optional for longevity, it's essential. Final thoughts. As we wrap up this exploration, I want to emphasize something important. The decline many men experience after 75 isn't inevitable biological destiny. It's often the result of subtle life pattern changes that trigger cascading biological consequences. The isolation cascade, the stewardship void, circadian disruption, emotional insulation, and purpose atrophy. These 5 factors don't strike suddenly like a heart attack or appear on a medical test. They creep in gradually, often disguised as normal aging or reasonable lifestyle adjustments. But once you recognize these patterns, you can intervene. You can rebuild social connections, even in modified ways. You can reclaim areas of meaningful responsibility. You can stabilize your daily rhythms. You can find appropriate channels for emotional expression. And perhaps most importantly, you can rediscover or reinvent your sense of purpose. I've seen men transform their health trajectories well into their 80s once they understand these principles. It doesn't require massive life overhauls, often small, consistent changes create remarkable improvements. So as you reflect on what we've discussed today, ask yourself, which of these factors resonates most strongly with your situation or with a man you care about? What small step could you take this week to begin addressing it? Because the truth about longevity isn't just about avoiding disease, it's about maintaining the psychological and social patterns that tell your body life is still worth living. And when you do that, you not only add years to your life, you add life to your years. Thank you for watching. If you found value in this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might benefit. Your comments mean a lot to us. They help guide our future content and let us know what resonates with you. Until next time, this is Dr. Marshall, reminding you that aging is inevitable, but how you age is largely up to you.